Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you with part 2 of my conversation with Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. If you missed it, go back. It's a very insightful conversation. And in case you missed it, here is a little bit of background about Kwame. For nearly a decade, he served as a middle school math teacher. Currently, he is the founder of Identity Talk Consulting, a global educational consulting firm that specializes in developing K-12 teachers into identity-affirming educators. Throughout his 17-year career as a classroom teacher, author, and consultant, Kwame has worked in the United States, Ethiopia, Sierra Leone, and Zambia, where he is currently based. Additionally, he's earned numerous accolades for his work, and his newest book, Learning to Relearn, Supporting Identity in a Culturally Affirming Classroom, recently won the 2025 IPPY Award for Best Education Commentary Book. And you're going to hear a lot more about what that book's about in this conversation. So we're picking up the conversation with Kwame telling us about the evolution of his podcast and how that has supported his entrepreneurship journey.
Now, fast forward to 2025, I've been able to talk to 35 different schools. And within those 6 years, I've been able to do virtual conference at the height of COVID. I've read 2 more books and started my own podcast while being abroad. And the only reason why I started the podcast was because I wanted to be back in the classroom so badly, and I wanted to have that community so badly that I had to create one for myself where I could connect with educators and be nosy about what they do. That's essentially how my podcast, Identity Talk for Educators Live, was born. And that was December 2019, while I was still finding my way in Ethiopia. Since then, I've been able to interview over 200 different educators across the globe. And it's because of this podcast that I've been able to do the conference, because some of the people who are past guests from the podcast were presenters at this virtual conference. And then even with my latest book, Learn to Relearn, a lot of the excerpts that are in the book were from past interviews I've done with guests. So the podcast has served as a tool to not only build community, but it's also given me an opportunity to build my digital footprint as someone who people would say is a thought leader in the education space. So I recognize that the more I put content out, the more people can locate me, even potential employers. So I can remember interviewing for a math teacher position for an international school in Uganda. And during this interview, I kid you not, Florence, the head of school asked me the question, "Hey, Kwame, tell me about your podcast." This is during the interview. So now I'm like, oh, wow, people are really paying attention to this podcast and leading to just all these cool connections. So I can say that even though it's been a struggle to find work and there's been a lot of highs and lows, I can honestly say that I've been able to do a lot of networking over the past 5-6 years that's led to some powerful connections. So some of the people that you've had on the show, like Mamuna and Dr. Lori, these are people that I've met as a result of the podcast, and they've actually been on my own podcast, but I've also met them through other channels because of the networking, the 6 degrees of separation. So like, that's what I've been able to do all this time. Even though I haven't been able to get back in the classroom, I've been able to create a profile professionally that's allowed for me to still stay afloat and stay relevant, because I was able to network and leverage my talents to do some other creative endeavor.
That's awesome. I remember reading about the podcast. Tell us about your podcast experience, just in terms of as a fellow podcaster. We're curious about where do your platforms, how do you go about deciding on bringing on different guests, and is it live?
Most of the episodes are pre-recorded because where I am geographically.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not in spaces where you always have reliable electricity. So just to be on the safe side, I pre-record. But in terms of my process, when I select people to be guests, because the podcast is about centering the identity stories of educators, I'm looking for people that have interesting identities, overlapping identities, and compelling stories that are centered around their identity. So that's usually something that I look for. And to be honest, a lot of the guests I've had over the past 6 years have been women of color, and that's on purpose. So even though it's not a black podcast, quote unquote, I'm very open when I say I'm open in my space for international educators of color because they are the ones who experience a lot of marginalization and they don't always have the access to spaces where they can share those stories, where they can showcase what they know and their expertise. So I've been very intentional about creating a space where they're able to do that and be their full selves unapologetically because I've come to realize that in their own school settings, they're not able to do just that. They don't have anybody there where they can open up and be vulnerable. So it's not until they come to a space like my podcast where they're able to do that. And that was one of the things that I realized was happening. And quite honestly, that's what gave me the inspiration to even want to write the book because when I was interviewing these people, they kept coming back to this idea of having a place where they feel like they belong,
Mm,
getting people to
okay.
understand
Hmm.
where they come from, getting people to understand their identities and why their identities are so important to them, understanding how their identities play a role in informing their worldview and how people view them and how it prevents them from even getting opportunities, whether it's professional or just to advance their careers in some shape or form. So I've heard all the stories and that's really what led to me wanting to write a book because it goes back to my own story of
Right.
being
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. Full
So
circle.
there's a
Hmm.
full
Hmm.
circle moment there.
Wow. So the book, which you're talking about, Learning to Relearn, I love that title because I feel like it is a learning process to relearn, to reprogram, to really change your mind in a different way. So before we get straight into talking about specifically some tools and techniques and how you went about structuring the book, I want to ask you about your mindset hack. Because that's what this relearning is about. So, what is your mindset hack? How do you change your mind?
How do I change my mind? I change my mind by, I think, first off, being open minded, by having humility,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that you don't always have the answers. And there is someone out
Mm.
there that may be smarter than you in a certain topic or area. So it's wise to reach out to that person and find out more about what they know so you can build your capacity. So if we're talking about identity, I'm very cognizant of the fact that I grew up as a cis heterosexual black man in America. I'm very much cognizant of that. So I'm very much aware of the fact that I have queer and gay friends who navigate the world differently than I do. And they are not able to travel to certain countries that I'm able to travel to. They're not able to express themselves in a way that I'm able to express myself. I recognize that. But I only
Mm-hmm.
know this
Mm-hmm.
because I've talked to them, right? I also
Right.
recognize the fact that as a non-native person, I'm on stolen land. So for my indigenous friends who have informed me about settler colonialism and even just the history of different tribal communities and how they've been dehumanized and how they've had to be forced out of their reservations and stripped of their language and stripped of their culture through the era of boarding schools and other events that have taken place historically. I had to learn that, especially when I was writing a book, because I'm writing a book
Mm-hmm.
that's focused on historically marginalized communities, many of which I'm not a part of. So
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't be smart of me to write about these things without having the actual people who can provide a first world experience of what that is. So the book features 30 plus educators from all the different communities I've mentioned, and they're able to share their first person stories about what it's like to be in those communities and how that impacts who they are personally, professionally. And I believe that's what makes this such a special book is the fact that even though I'm the name that you see on the front as the author, this was a collaborative effort. And this book
Sure.
could not have
Yeah.
been written without the contributions of those 30 plus educators. And that's what
Mhm.
makes me most proud of this work.
Nice. So it's available where? Where can we get the book?
Anywhere where they sell books online. But if you want to go to the main website, you can go to learningtorelearn.com. And that's a numeral two in the middle.
Okay. Okay, good. So that'll be in the show notes, of course. And so thinking about education present and education moving forward, what are you thinking about supporting identity in a culturally affirming classroom and being in an international context now? And now starting to understand that even basically because the world is a moving melting pot, so to speak, as much as, we try and we are understanding that you are a global citizen, you're moving around, and there are many peers that you're also seeing. Where do you see education and the craft of teaching and the craft of creating teaching and learning materials moving in the next 5 years?
I think we're starting to see that evolution right now with the
Mm-hmm.
emergence of AI and other
Mm-hmm.
technologies.
Yeah.
We've come to a place where we have to realize that education is changing. The way we do education has to change. What we were doing prior to COVID, that's not the way we have to go anymore or should go.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think what's happening now is we have to reframe our minds to be receptive to new, innovative ways of interacting with our students,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
bringing more emphasis to career development and education, bringing more awareness around entrepreneurship. With social media being what it is, with young people having easy access to information that allows for them to become millionaires before the age of 20, before they can even get a drink. We got to be realistic about what's happening and understand that there's opportunities for our young people. And also, our schools have to catch up to that. If we're talking about student
Mm-hmm.
engagement, we have to meet the students where they are, which means that we need to take another look at our curriculum. We need to take another look at our policies and figure out how can we meet our students where they are and provide them with the resources necessary to be 21st century learners, to be the leaders,
And doers, right?
doers as
Right.
well,
Yeah.
the doers. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not even about grades, it's about competencies.
Right. Exactly.
Like
Mm-hmm.
employers now are shifting the way that they recruit talent. They're looking at specific competencies that you have to possess in order to be considered a good fit for their company. That's all shifting as we're speaking right now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Looking at the educator side, I wonder from you working with so many educators, what are you seeing as the profile of an educator that's ready to do that work?
In terms of someone who's ready to do that work, I see somebody who understands that this is the reality. They are open minded, they are receptive, and they are someone who is very much responsive to the needs of their students, meaning that they listen to what their students say and they're able to take that constructive feedback and use it as a way to create learning experiences that are relevant to the lived experiences of their students. But in order to get there, you have to be willing to listen to your students and make the necessary adjustments to your instruction that's going to allow for you to increase the engagement within the classroom.
That sounds like coaching to me. And so, yeah, yeah. So I hear you. And what is your call to the organizations that are training these teachers? Because what I do know by and large is that we have a chew and pour. We've particularly in Africa and to some extent, in Western cultures, we've had this chew and pour educational system where it's meant and tailored to tests, right? As opposed to actually skills development and actually, productivity. And so when you have chew and pour throughout all the levels, so even on the level of educating teachers, you have chew and pour. So they're not even necessarily in a position always to be able to do that listing and do that pivoting because they really haven't mastered some of the techniques that are effective in classrooms. What is your call to those institutions educating teachers to be professionals and be effective in classroom?
Well, I would first say that teaching is an art form. First
Yes,
and
thank you for
foremost.
that.
So if you want your teachers to be in a position where they can be successful, you gotta let them eat. You gotta let them rock,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You gotta give them
Mm-hmm.
some level of autonomy creatively
Yeah.
so they can be innovative, so they can create these dynamic experiences that will allow for students to have the best educational experience that they can get,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And also with teaching, because it's the art form, that means that there has to be space for teachers to be decision makers, space for
Mm-hmm.
teachers to make executive decisions on curriculum that they're teaching students. As a
Mm-hmm.
teacher, we're making thousands of decisions a day, thousands of decisions. And you can't do that independently if you don't have the license to do it within your school community. So,
Right. Like culture of, the organization. Sure.
so I
Mm-hmm.
would say for those institutions who are training these teachers, I think it's important to provide that autonomy, number one, but also to understand that we're in a different world now. We're in a totally different world. And I would even tell the pre-service teachers that, hey, yes, you are a classroom teacher, but your influence can go beyond that space.
Right.
It took me until year 8, year 9 to figure that out. They now have an opportunity to create their own path as educators and do it in a way that's never been done before. And what better time to do it than now, where you have so many different tools that are available to you. We mentioned AI, we have social media, we have all these different assets and different resources available that we didn't have 20 plus years ago when we
Mm-hmm.
were
Mm-hmm.
when we were trained to become teachers, and even years before that when we were still kids. We didn't have any of this stuff. So I think it's an exciting time from that standpoint to be an educator.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. I think education is where it's at, folks. We got to teach them, teach and get these kids in a place that we can fully leave a legacy that they can carry as well. Yeah. I've loved this conversation about education and all of your travels and experiences, but we also want to know who is Kwame when he's not being a consultant, being an author, being a father, but I guess partially when you're being a father. Are you a reader? Are you a watcher? Are you a listener? Or what are some of your favorite other things that you do in your leisure time?
For me, I would say that during my leisure time, I've been doing a lot of Duolingo lately.
Oh, okay. Which language?
French.
French. Okay.
Yeah, so pretty much my whole family's been doing Duolingo. So, my wife, my son, like we've all been doing it and trying to get better with that. So that's
So French, because do you have a background in learning French in school or just because it's
well,
facilitates work and living abroad?
I think both. So when I
Mm,
was in Ghana, because we were around a lot of francophone countries, French
yes.
was one of the language we had to learn, and we also had to
Okay.
be
Mhm.
tested in French. So,
Oh, okay.
so
So
when
you have good working written.
I wouldn't say that, I'm super fluent. Like I understand French from, in terms of reading, it's easier, but speaking is a challenge. It's hard. It is
Mm-hmm,
hard.
mm-hmm,
But if you were
mm-hmm.
to show me some text in French, I have the ability to translate it and let you know what exactly it means.
Sure.
So that's
Right.
my level of
Yeah.
proficiency. So yeah, Duolingo's one thing, and then I'm a sports documentary junkie. Yeah.
Oh,
I
interesting.
like to
Okay.
watch documentaries. I like to listen to podcasts. But I do need to diversify that and expand my mind a little bit.
Sure, sure. But I'm curious about some of the athletes that you have recently taken in documentary form.
Oh man, which one did I watch recently? I actually ended up watching the Brett Favre documentary that was on Netflix.
Hmm.
That's one of
Okay.
that's one of the recent ones I've seen, and that was interesting and also disturbing at the same time.
Mm.
Growing up, Brett Favre was my brother's favorite quarterback because my brother was a Green Bay Packers fan, and you don't realize the lives of these athletes off the field and some of the problematic things that they're doing. So, I mean, watching that documentary was eye opening. But one of my favorite ones was the Coach Prime series, Deion Sanders.
Ah, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I've
Yeah,
watched all
yeah.
the seasons, so I've been able to follow his journey from Jackson State all the way to Colorado, see how he works with his two sons, well, his three sons.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
his
Mm-hmm.
oldest is the videographer. That's dope because I grew up a Deion Sanders fan, watching him play,
Yeah.
so to see him in this element of a coach and still have that swag that he did as a player. That was
Right.
something that was cool to watch. So Coach Prime series is definitely a good one.
Recommended. Yeah. I've heard great things about it and I get so I'm a reader. So TV and watching is less of what I do, but I've heard so much about it. I should pick
Yeah.
that one up. So those are good
Now,
recommendations.
I did, in terms of a book I read recently, I did finish The Message from Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
And that was a great read because he talked about, really, in a nutshell, the importance of journalistic integrity,
Yeah.
how media outlets and journalists they hold so much power in terms of how people view the world because of the narrative that they put out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, when he was talking about, he talked about his trip to Senegal, how that was eye-opening to him. He talked about his
Yeah.
early life as a kid when he started to discover the power of writing and the
Mm-hmm.
power of writing your own narrative. And then he even spent more than half of the book talking about his trip to Israel and Palestine
Really.
and how
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
really impacted him. And that was really the most compelling part of the entire book.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I've understood.
So much
Mm-hmm.
so that I was like, okay, I understand it now.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're somebody who has no idea why what's happening in Gaza is taking place, like, if you don't understand, that book's going to help you understand
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Accessible. Yeah. And
book
it's
one
accessible.
is accessible. It's the entry point to you understanding the long history of Israeli genocide in Palestine. So I would say for people to definitely get a copy of that book. Such a powerful read.
Sure. Those are great recommendations. Thank you for that. Well, Kwame, so lovely to meet you. I'm so happy we had time to do this and I'm happy that you are doing what you're doing because it's important and necessary. And I hope you have even more impact and reach across the Black diaspora. Particularly, I love what you said about wanting to uplift Black women as educators and having them be heard because you're right. We are an often erased and silenced group. And so thank you for that. And so before we sign off for today, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Last thoughts, I would say because this is the Glocal Citizens podcast, I'm gonna just share some words for folks who are abroad who may be in the trailing spouse position,
Mm-hmm,
especially as men,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Because I think when you are as a man, we're usually taught or socialized to be the doers, to be the ones that are out gaining money, to be the ones that are working, and the ones who are not at home. But what I've been able to discover through my process, which has not been easy, is that there is value in being present. I think being a trailer spouse and being able to be at home, to be able to spend more time with my sons than I would if I was in the States. I think that's been valuable. Being able to go to my oldest son's school in the middle of the day and read a book to his class or take part in an activity and or be a parent volunteer. These are things that I would not have been able to do easily if I was still a full-time teacher in Boston with my family being there. I would not have been able to do that. So to be able to have that time to do those things, that's one of the perks for sure. I'll just tell those who are in that position and you're struggling to find your way or try to create your identity in that space, you gotta just find ways to get yourself out there. You gotta network. LinkedIn's your friend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
a LinkedIn junkie. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. And the main reason is because you meet so many people there. And that's the space where you're going to meet pretty much all the employers. You're going to meet the organizations, the NGOs. They're all in this space. So if you're someone that is not a fan of social media and you have no accounts, at a minimum, you got to have a LinkedIn account. That you got to. If you're going to have only one account for social media, make it a LinkedIn account.
Right. Because that means you're about your business.
You're about that business as well.
Yeah. Those are great last thoughts. Thank you for that. Thank you. Woo! All right, Glocal citizens. I hope that you have grasped and understood so many different things. I really have enjoyed this conversation. We touched on trailing spousehood. That is such a Glocal citizen's reality and a global citizen's reality. So that's wonderful to understand. Teaching and learning, and this idea of identity. I mean, we really have, first of all, to find and seek it for ourselves if we're not grounded in one, and then also to be committed to helping others, particularly our kids, to also find and be grounded in their identities. So this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Please like, share, subscribe, leave us a review. Check out the show notes. They're going to be very, 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 very rich this week. And until next time, bye for now.